The Cretaceous period in Earth's history was generally a greenhouse world, with high atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, high global temperatures, and sea level about 200 to 300 meters higher than today. Huge, shallow seas covered many of the present-day continents. It was a time when birds and flowering plants evolved and modern insect groups diversified. The Cretaceous takes its name from its extensive chalk strata, composed of the skeletons of countless tiny algae in shallow seas. It was a time when today's oceans were beginning to take shape. Pangaea continued to disintegrate, with the South Atlantic Ocean opening up as Africa and South America rifted apart. The Cretaceous period had a variable climate, with oscillations between warm and cold about every 2 million years, and major swings in average temperature over a 20 million year cycle. The Cretaceous is often described as a warm greenhouse world, but this really only applies to part of it. At the outset, the Jurassic climate continued, with warm temperatures and no evidence for polar ice caps. Reptiles flourished, and flowering plants evolved and spread. During the Cretaceous, the sea level stood higher than at any time in geological history. The continental shelves and adjacent lands were flooded, providing diverse marine habitats for invertebrate life. Yet this time of flourishing marine life ended in disaster, for terrestrial animals as well. Cretaceous marine invertebrate faunas were not unlike those of the Jurassic, with ammonoids, bivalves, gastropods, brachiopods, echinoids, crinoids and bryozoans. Yet many ammonoids developed strange shapes, some being uncoiled or partially recoiled, or even twisted in a series of U-shaped to form an unlikely tangle. The late Cretaceous chalk of northern Europe is a source of beautiful preserved, although not especially common, marine invertebrates. This unique sediment is largely composed of calcareous plates of tiny algae. Marine life flourished, including sea-dwelling reptiles, while on land dinosaurs, flying reptiles, and birds proliferated. Yet all this was to change dramatic. At the very end of the Cretaceous, 66 million years ago, ammonites, belemnites, ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs abruptly vanished, as did non-avian dinosaurs and pterosaurs. An asteroid hit Earth, creating shock waves, dust clouds, forest fires and acid rain. The collision site has been identified in Yucatan, buried by later sediment. At the same time, huge volcanic eruptions in India created widespread devastation, and the effects of both together were catastrophic. Study of a fossil rainforest suggests that its recovery after this mass extinction took 1.5 million years. Siphonia was a genus of unusual sponges that inhabited the western part of the Tethys Sea, a shallow body of water that lay over what is now Western Europe. They were characterized by bulbous heads and were attached to the seabed by a narrower stalk. Some forms resembled a partially inflated balloon. Its fossil has tiny pores all over their outer surface. These were the openings of conical tubes that ran all the way through the sponge's body to its larger, central canal, called a cloaca. On the cloacal wall, the tube openings were larger. The cloacal surface was also marked with furrows. Ventriculites was a glass sponge, with a skeleton of siliceous needles that were fused into a rigid network to support the sponge's body. Between them were pores that dotted the surface. The skeleton of this fossil is vase-shaped, and siliceous fibers anchored it to the seabed. In its center was a cavity called the cloaca. Food and oxygen were removed as water passed through the body walls before exiting through the top opening. Lunulites was a chylostome bryozoan that formed very small, circular colonies. Its lower surface was concave, with radial grooves. The colony originated at the center, and radiating from this were rectangular to hexagonal autozooidia, chambers that housed soft-bodied, feeding autozoids. The animals that made up the colony, all autozooids, possessed a lophophore or feeding structure consisting of a ring of tentacles surrounding the mouth, which could be withdraws into the autozooidia for protection when not feeding. Crania is a brachiopod that first appeared in the Cretaceous and still has relatives alive today. Scientists describe Crania as an inarticulate brachiopod because the two halves of its shell are not articulated or joined together, but are held together by muscles alone. Unlike most brachiopods, it has no pedicle. It is commonly found in chalk deposits with one half of its shell cemented to a large organism, such as a mollusk or echinoderm. Because its shell halves are held together by soft tissue, the bottom half is often the only part preserved, the top half having been swept away before fossilization could take place. Orborhynchia was a rounded rhynchonellate brachiopod with strongly convex valves. Each valve had a pronounced beak. In life, it would have attached itself to the seabed with a fleshy stalk, or pedicle. This passed through the pedicle opening, visible on the specimen on the right, below the beak of the pedicle valve. The external shell had strong rib, running from the edge of the beak to the shell's edge. Cymatoceras was a tightly coiled cephalopod mollusk that was similar in many respects to the modern nautilus. The principal difference from nautilus, apart from the broader shell, is the presence of fairly strong ribs, which are strongest on the outer part of the whorl and over the wide outer edge. It would have caught prey with its flexible tentacles. Prey would have then been dismembered by using its horny beak. Mortonicera's fossils are characterized by their square section whorls and strong ornamentation, which is produced by a combination of ribs and tubercles. The whorls overlap only slightly, leading to a very shallow umbilicus. This coiling is described as moderately evolute. A pronounced ridge, known as the keel, is on the outer edge. In some mature specimens, a large horn is visible at the opening on the shell. This has not been associated with just one sex in this genus. Scaphites was an unusual ammonite. When young, it resembled many other ammonites, possessing a normal, spiral shell, but as it grew older the shape of its shell changed. Instead of continuing to spiral, it straightened, before spiraling once again, which created a hooked ape. Errance. This left the shell opening facing upward. Fossils show that this opening was often constricted and thickened around its edges and positioned very close to its chambered shell. This raises the possibility that the final growth stage would have prevented the animal from actually feeding. It may be that, having reached maturity, the adult reproduced and the died. Baculites was unlike most ammonoids. Rather than having a spiral shell, like many of its relatives, it had a shell that was almost completely straight. The shape of the shell suggests that it was a squid-like animal. Only on the very tip were there 1 or 2 minute whorls. Because they are long and straight, they fracture easily, breaking along the partitions between the chambers, and are often found as fragments rather than complete shells. Baculites are roughly egg-shaped. In some places these fossils are found in large quantities, to the near exclusion of other species. Belemnitella is a common belemnite fossil and several different species of the genus are known. Belemnites were squid-like in appearance, as shown by the few rare fossils preserving their soft tissues. The bullet-shaped hard part of the body, which forms most belemnite fossils, helped keep the animal's body straight. The fossils are typically cylindrical with pointed tips. There is a distinctive slit in one side near to the pointed end. The large numbers of Belemnitella fossils found in some localities suggest that they lived in sizable schools. Spondylus is an ancient genus of bivalve shellfish, with fossils that date back almost 200 million years. The genus is not extinct, however, and several species still exist in the world's warmer seas today. Both fossilized and modern shells vary greatly in appearance within and across species. Spondylus species live with the lower valve cemented to the seabed. This valve's beak region is often rather blunt because this is where the shell would have joined to the seabed. Many fossils were originally described as having no hinge teeth, but it was later discovered that this absence was caused by the breakdown of the internal layers of the shell, which left only the outer layer intact. Marsupids is a large crinoid that has no stem. At the base of the cup is a large pentagonal plate where, in most crinoids, the stem attachment would be seen. Above the base, 3 circlets of plates that comprise the lower cup may be almost smooth or ornamented with ridges radiating from the center of each plate. The upper plates have a marked semicircular depression at the center of their upper edge where the arms join to the main body. It is believed that it lived on the seabed or possibly with part, or even most, of its cup buried in the soft chalk sediment in which it is found. The arms would have been active in feeding, but on death they broke off and drifted away, so that only the base of the arms has ever been found. Temnosidaris is an echinoid with very strong differences between the ambulacral and interambulacral areas. The interambulacral areas are very wide and the plates are dominated by large spine bases, bearing long spines with smaller spines along their length. In the center of each plate is a round boss that joined with a socket at the end of the long spines, muscles that controlled the spines attached to the smooth area around the boss. The ambulacral areas are very narrow and sinuous, consisting of many smaller plates with perforations for the water supply to the tube feet. This supply enabled the tube feet to extend and retract. Micraster was a burrowing, heart-shaped echinoid with its 5 ambulacral areas forming a petal shape on the mouth, which is found well to the front side of the oral surface. The anal opening is on the steep back part of the upper surface, and beneath it is a smooth ring or fasciole on the shell that in life would have had hair-like structures to convey waste material away from the anus. Most of the rest of the test is covered with small tubercles and, during life, these supported a dense cover of short, slender spines. The shell or carapace of this Cretaceous crab is almost oval, with a rounded outline. The upper surface is marked with a pattern of broad, shallow grooves, which form 2 conjoined diamond shapes, with the larger toward the front. Smaller, subsidiary grooves run into either side of the larger diamond. The front edge of the carapace is fairly blunt, and has a very short rostrum in the center. The orbits, where the eyes are situated in life, lie to either side of the rostrum. The oldest fossil crabs have been found in rocks of the early Jurassic. By the late Cretaceous, several lineages had evolved, but it was not until the Cenozoic that they became abundant and widespread. The Cretaceous was the pinnacle of dinosaur evolution, and at no point in their history were dinosaurs as abundant, diverse, and dominant. However, in the shadow of the dinosaurs, groups such as birds, mammals and crocodiles also diversified, setting the stage for the modern world. One of the most extraordinary and important discoveries of modern paleontology is that birds evolved from dinosaurs. The closest relatives of birds are theropods, swift, sleek, keen predators with large brains and high metabolisms. More recently, even closer relatives of birds have been found. These include raptors such as Microraptor, which were small, lived in trees, and could probably even glide or fly. Indeed, today there is barely any distinction between the most bird-like dinosaurs and the earliest true birds. All of these animals were small, brainy, covered in feathers and capable of flying. Marine ecosystems went through a remarkable period of change during the Mesozoic. This massive reorganization occurred on all levels, from primary producers all the way up to top predators. Large predators such as sharks and mosasaurs spread around the world, and why fish became astonishingly common. The changes were not limited to vertebrates. In fact, many of the greatest changes involved invertebrates and microscopic organisms, the major modern groups of planktonic microorganisms. The primary producers that form the base of every oceanic food web originated and diversified during this time. The extinction of the dinosaurs has been one of the greatest mysteries of Earth's history. What could cause such a successful group to die off? 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Most scientists think that this impact set in motion a chain reaction of environmental disturbances such as tsunamis and acid rains, which spelled the end for the dinosaurs, marine and flying reptiles. Hoplopteryx is an extinct relative of the modern slimeheads. Its remains have been found in chalk deposits, which suggests it inhabited a shallow water environment. It had large eyes on upturned mouth and jaws lined with small teeth. It was a deep-bodied fish with small pectoral fins and pelvic fins almost directly below them. On the underside, the single anal fin had a straight rear edge and the tail was deeply forked with equal-sized lobes. It displayed an advance over other fish in the form of a series of bones called urwanerals in the upper lobe of the tail. The largest known bony fish, Cyphactinus, was a formidable predator. It had a long, well-muscled body with a backbone of over 100 vertebrae. This and the deeply forked tail indicate that it was a powerful swimmer and probably pursued its prey rather than ambushing it. The upturned lower jaw could gape widely, allowing it to consume large fish and possibly small marine reptiles. A 2 meters ichthyodectid fish has been found in the fossilized stomach contents of a 4 meters Cyphactinus. In turn, Cyphactinus have been found in the fossilized stomach contents of a shark, suggesting that despite its size and ferocity it was not the top predator in its ancient ecosystem. Squalocorax is an extinct member of the mackerel shark group. It had a typical shark body shape and its teeth were similar in outline to those of a modern tiger shark. It was a top predator and probably fed on mosasaurs, turtle and fish. Fours, greater than isolated teeth have been found alongside a skeleton of Cretaceous, which suggests it may also have scavenged on the carcasses of its larger cousin. Lepisosteus first appeared about 110 million years ago. Today they are found in freshwater habitats in North and Central America and Cuba. They are similar in appearance to lizard fish, and it is possible they evolved in parallel to suit particular niches that existed in both saltwater and freshwater environments. Modern gars have changed little from their early Cretaceous ancestors. Bizabufo was only discovered in 2008. Its most remarkable feature is its size, which is far larger than any other known frog or toad, living or fossil. It would have coexisted with the last dinosaurs, and been large enough to eat their newly hatched young. It is a close relative of the living South American horned frogs that ambush their prey, using their huge mouth and the large, fang-like spikes of bone as their jaws to grab small animals as they pass. Its resemblance to modern South America frogs, rather than living Madagascan frogs, is yet more support for a past connection between South America, India and Madagascar in the Cretaceous. Trionyx is a large, soft-shelled turtle that survives today in Africa and the Middle East. Like other soft-shell turtles, it has a flat upper shell that is covered with shin and lacks bony plates. The skulls of soft-shell turtles are unusual among living turtles in being extremely long and very narrow, which is an ideal design for their ambush hunting lifestyle. It has been around for a remarkably long time. Members of the genus have been in existence since the Cretaceous, surviving devastating mass extinction. During the late Cretaceous, North America was almost cut in two by a vast inland sea. A strange menagerie of prehistoric life inhabited these warm waters, including enormous fish, toothed birds and colossal turtles called Protostega. It was one of the largest turtles ever known, reaching lengths of around 3 meters and weights over 250 kilograms, but it was only the second largest turtle of the Cretaceous, after Archelon. Protostega was fully marine and rarely ventured onto land. Its limbs functioned as effective paddles, and its thick shell was relatively light and streamlined so that it could travel quickly through the water. Its skull was characteristic of a turtle. It was short, wide, lacked teeth on its snout and sported a sharp beak. Elasmosaurus was one of the last plesiosaurs. More than half its total body length was made up of the neck, which contained 71 vertebrae, more than any other animal that has ever existed. This was a source of great confusion for Edward Drinker Cope, who described the first specimen in 1869, because he placed the head on the end of the tail, which he had misidentified as the neck. It had a relatively small head and probably ambushed fish by maneuvering its neck. Its long, narrow teeth would have been perfect for piercing and trapping small, soft prey. Named after Kronos, the titan of Greek legend, Kronosaurus was among the last of the giant pliosauroids, a group of plesiosaurians with large heads and short, stocky necks. However, recent work shows that Kronosaurus was not as enormous as was once thought, and its estimated length has been reduced from 12 meters to 9 meters. Like other pliosauroids, it used 4 large flippers to swim, but whether it used these to row like the oars of a boat or fly underwater like a sea turtle is not known. It is possible that the answer is somewhere in between. For about 20 million years during the late Cretaceous, the oceans teemed with one of the most spectacular groups of predators to ever evolve, the mosasaurs. These were gigantic relatives of today's lizards and snakes, that were adapted for life in the sea. Mosasaurus was a voracious, crocodile-like hunter that swam by undulating its long body. As a result, it was incapable of swimming fast over long distances, but it could accelerate very rapidly when required. It probably lived in the well-lit surface waters of the oceans, hunting slower-moving prey. Its bite marks have been found on ammonites and on the shells of large turtles, suggesting that it was capable of catching sizable prey. One of the best-known mosasaurs is Pleoplate carpus, a mid-sized predator that lived in the warm, shallow seas of North America and Europe around 80 million years ago. Its skull was long and powerful and studded with a series of thick, conical teeth like those of living crocodiles. Its body was elongated and streamlined, the hands and feet were modified into broad flippers, and the tail was deep and muscular. The jaws of this mosasaur were able to open very wide, enabling it to bite and swallow prey that was much larger than itself. This behavior is also seen in living snakes and is one of the features that marks the two groups as close relatives. Simosuchus is perhaps the strangest crocodilomorph to have ever lived. Most members of this group were powerful predators with strong, elongated skulls crammed full of sharp teeth. Simosuchus, however, had a short skull with a flattened face that resembled a pug dog. Not only that, but it also had a wide snout with a series of leaf-shaped teeth, perfect for shearing and chewing plants. This peculiar, herbivorous crocodile lived in Madagascar during the late Cretaceous, about 70 million years ago. It lived alongside more characteristic crocodiles that ate meat, as well as many large theropod dinosaurs. It may have avoided competition with these carnivores by evolving a plant-based diet. Other herbivorous crocodilomorphs also lived during the Cretaceous, although they were rare and none survive today. They shared ecosystems with herbivorous dinosaurs, which was a strange ecological pairing. Along with Sarcosuchus, Deinosuchus was one of the largest crocodilomorphs to ever live, weighing up to 9 tons. However, it lived much more recently than Sarcosuchus, and is a member of the alligatorid family that also includes the modern alligators. It was one of the most ferocious predators of the North American coastal regions, and in some areas overlapped with tyrannosaurids. In these ecosystems it was Deinosuchus, not the tyrannosaurids, that was the largest and most powerful predator. Its anatomy and overall body plan was very similar to that of living crocodiles, so it is easy to imagine it as a giant version of living species. It probably hunted in a similar way to modern crocodiles, by lurking around the water's edge and preying on fish, marine reptiles, and the occasional land animal. Pteranodon soared across the shallow seas of North America during the late Cretaceous. It is likely that it flew and hunted in the same way as an albatross. Vast flocks probably glided over the ocean while looking for fish in the surface waters. It is certain that they ate fish because fish bones have been found in the fossilized stomach of one specimen. The skull of Pteranodon was also well adapted for fishing, with long, toothless jaws and a streamlined skull for diving into the water. The colossal late Cretaceous pterosaur Quetzalcoatlus was the largest flying animal of all time. Its wingspan was larger than any small planes, and its 2.5-meter skull would dwarf even the tallest basketball players. Despite its monstrous size, however, it weighed no more than 250 kilograms, thanks to a complex system of air sacs inside most of its bones. For a long time scientists thought that most pterosaurs ate fish and spent much of their time gliding over the sea, only venturing over land to catch small mammals and lizards. However, it is now believed that Quetzalcoatlus and its Azychtearchid relatives may have spent most of their time flying over land and targeting large vertebrates as prey. It is likely, therefore, that it fueled its enormous metabolic needs by stalking and feeding on dinosaurs. In the early Cretaceous, about 40 million years before the gigantic Quetzalcoatlus stalked dinosaurs across the North American plains, another giant pterosaur ruled supreme in Europe and South America. This large beast, Ornithischians, has long caused headaches for paleontologists because it is known only from fragmentary fossils. However, these bones suggest that its wingspan may have approached 10 meters. A close relative of Ornithischians, a smaller pterosaur from South America called Anhanguera, is known from exceptionally well-preserved fossils that have even allowed scientists to examine details of the bird's powerful brain. Anhanguera clearly had sharp senses and a strong sense of balance, all of which are necessary for flight, a complex and dangerous activity. Spinosaurus is a carnivorous dinosaur that lived in what is now northern Africa during the Cretaceous period. Most scientists agree that this dinosaur probably hunted both on land and in water and probably lived on a diet of both fish and small mammals. It is believed these dinosaurs floated in much the same way that modern crocodiles do, lying in wait and then using the element of surprise to hunt prey. Spinosaurus is one of the biggest dinosaurs known to scientists today. There are a lot of interesting facts surrounding this large dinos. It is one of the first dinosaurs to have been identified as the first possible swimming dinosaur. It is believed that these dinosaurs walked on all fours when they weren't in the water but could also rear up on their hind legs like grizzly bears when they threatened. This dinosaur has a tail with an unexpected and unique shape that consists of extremely tall neural spines and elongate chevrons, which forms a large flexible fin-like organ capable of extensive lateral excursion using a robotic flapping apparatus to measure undulatory forces. In physical models of different tail shapes show that the tail shape of Spinosaurus produces greater thrust and efficiency in water than the tail shapes of terrestrial dinosaurs, and that these measures of performance are more comparable to those of extant aquatic vertebrates that use vertically expanded tails to generate forward propulsion while swimming. These results are consistent with the suite of adaptations for an aquatic lifestyle and piscivorous diet that have previously been documented for Spinosaurus, although developed to a lesser degree. Aquatic adaptations are also found in other members of the Spinosaurid clade which had a near global distribution and a stratigraphic range of more than 50 million years, pointing to a substantial invasion of aquatic environments by dinosaurs. Fragmentary fossil had long suggested that a close relative of Baryonyx lived in Niger Thewa, as confirmed in 1998 with the naming of Suchomimus. A low blade-like crest extended along the snout's upper surface and a tall ridge ran along its back and probably its tail. Its arms were stout and the large muscle attachments indicate they were powerful. Baryonyx was discovered in 1983 by an amateur paleontologist and it proved to be one of Europe's most interesting dinosaur fossil. Crocodile-like jaws and teeth were combined with a fairly typical theropod skeleton. It is a spinosaurid and belongs to a family named after Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is known for its crest of tall spines running along its backbone. When first discovered, Baryonyx was thought to possess only short spines of the tops of its vertebrae. However, a new specimen has shown that these spines were longer, although still not as long as those of Spinosaurus. It seems that Baryonyx and perhaps all spinosaurids were specialized fish-eating dinosaurs that also ate other prey, including small dinosaurs. A close relative of Spinosaurus, Irritator, was named in 1996 when a near-complete skull was found in the Cretaceous rocks of Brazil. The skull had been modified by its finder to look like a pterosaur skull. As a result, the scientists who studied the specimen were initially misled about its identity, and the name they chose reflects their irritation at having been deceived. As with Spinosaurus, a bony crest was present on the upper surface of Irritator's snout. Unlike the crest, the eye sockets, the nostril openings were well away from the tip of the snout, and the teeth had conical crowns. Because no skeleton of Irritator has been found to date, little is known of the biology and behavior of this animal. Like other spinosaurids, it might have caught fish but could also have eaten carrion and land animals. Evidence for this feeding behavior comes from the discovery of a spinosaurid tooth embedded within a pterosaur neck bone. Carcharodontosaurus was a giant African allosauriod theropod named in 1931. Its serrated teeth resemble those of Carcharodon, the great white shark, hence the dinosaur's name. Carcharodontosaurus had a narrow head that was taller at the back than at the front of the snout. A recently discovered partial skull of this theropod was more than 1.6 meters long. Bony ridges on the top of the skull overhung the eyes, and the bones on the sides of its skull had a distinctive wrinkled texture. Using its massive jaws and long teeth, Carcharodontosaurus may have preyed on sauropods and other dinosaurs. Giganotosaurus was similar in size to the largest known individuals of Tyrannosaurus. Its skull and skeleton strongly resembled Carcharodontosaurus. The bones above and in front of the eye of Giganotosaurus had low, horn-like projections. Acrocanthosaurus was a giant North American allosauriid. It had a wide, muscular ridge of tall spines running along its back that would have stiffened if Acrocanthosaurus had latched onto a large prey animal. This stiffening might have helped Acrocanthosaurus to anchor its own body weight as it pulled and tore at its prey. Its powerful arms had a limited range of movement, but its fingers were equipped with massive curved claws that could withstand a lot of bending. This suggested that its hands might have grabbed prey, but it used its jaws for killing. Archosaurus was closely related to Carnotaurus, and they are united in a group called the Carnotaurinae. Its short deep-snouted skull was not as short or deep as that of Carnotaurus. Instead of horns, Archosaurus had low swelling over the top of each eye. Its small arms were also similar to those of its horned relative, but were proportionally longer, and the bones lacked some of the unusual proportions and extra bony possesses present in Carnotaurus. The hand of Archosaurus was unusual. 4 metacarpal bones were present, but the first and fourth lacked fingers. The second and third were attached to short fingers, but these lacked claws. It is known from findings in the Rio Colorado Formation, late Cretaceous rock in Argentina, that have yielded many dinosaurs. Carnotaurus was named in 1985 from a well-preserved partial skeleton. Its skull was short and deep for a theropod, and prominent thick blunt-tipped horns projected from the skull roof above the eyes, which may have been used in display or in flighting. The puny arms, which seem to lack an obvious function, may have been used in display. Skin impressions preserved with the skeleton show that large keeled scutes were arranged in rows on the neck and body. The upper arm bones of Carnotaurus were long and straight, but the lower arms and hands were very short. The shoulder joint was very mobile, so it may have been able to move its arms more freely than most theropods. The single specimen of this small, poorly known theropod consists of bones from the pelvish-hind limbs and tail. These provide little information on its overall appearance. However, it was definitely a coelurosaur, and a few of its details suggest that it might be an ancestor of the tyrannosaurids. It is presumed to be similar to animals such as Dialong and had long arms, 3-fingered hands, and slim hind limbs. Fragments of preserved muscle and skin tissue were discovered, but unfortunately there was no trace of the skin's external covering. Large and robust Dos Pletosaurus was a close relative of Tyrannosaurus but was geologically older. Ni equals 0.4 s, greater than its skull, was proportionally larger and longer than that of most tyrannosaurids, although not as large, deep or wide as that of Tyrannosaurus. Unlike Tyrannosaurus, it had a short triangular hornlet above and in front of the isis snout, with a bumpy gnarled upper surface and broad cheeks. A blunthorn-like lump projected sideways from beneath the eye socket. These features were typical of large tyrannosaurids. Albertosaurus was closely related to Gorgosaurus in the past. It was thought that the two were similar enough to be included in the same genus. How vert Hay are currently regarded as distinct because they differ in various skull details. It also seems to have had more slender hind limbs and proportionally smaller forelimbs than Gorgosaurus, but both were similar in size overall. There is an Albertosaurus bonebed that contains the remains of numerous juvenile and adult individual saw discovery that suggests that Albertosaurus was a social animal. The genus Tyrannosaurus contains the most famous dinosaur Tyrannosaurus rex, originally discovered in the late Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation of Montana, was widespread throughout western North America. It was one of the largest ever terrestrial carnivores, but whether it was an active hunter or just a scavenger is a subject of much worn tooth tips, and bone fragments preserved in its fossilized feces indicate that it routinely crushed and swallowed bones. Some scientists have argued that this, along with the fact that its arms were too short to grip prey and that it is believed to have had a highly developed sense of smell, support the idea that it was a scavenger. However, most paleontologists believe that it was probably an opportunistic carnivore that was able to actively hunt for prey when it needed to. Tarbosaurus was a large Asian tyrannosaurodont, a close relative of North America's Tyrannosaurus. Indeed, several experts have proposed that they should be regarded as different species of the same genus. However, the two differ in many details, and Tarbosaurus could be more closely related to Aleoramus and Dos Pletosaurus. It had a different skull and snout and slightly more teeth than Tyrannosaurus. Greater than these differences might have evolved because the two predators relied on different prey. Tyrannosaurus lived alongside giant horned dinosaurs, while Tarbosaurus presumably hunted sauropods, hadrosaurs and ankylosaurs. One Tarbosaurus fossil seems to preserve a throat sac beneath its lower jaw. This might have been used as an inflatable display structure during the breeding season. Like other members of the compsognathed family of theropods, Sinosauropteryx was a slender predator, with a long and pointed snout, that probably hunted for small vertebrate and invertebrate prey. What makes Sinosauropteryx fossils significant is the discovery of a covering of fuzzy proto-feathers, an extremely important discovery because of the evolutionary position of compsognathids in relation of birds. Subsequent finds proved that some of the later theropods that shared a common ancestor with compsognathids inherited the same feathery features, meaning that even Tyrannosaurus and Velociraptor had feathers of some kind.